Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this evening's webinar. We are with the Emory Alumni Association and glad to be bringing you this timely and very informative webinar. My name is Lane Consul-Canny. I'm the Senior Associate Director for Alumni Learning at Emory University. And I just love the timing of this webinar because we are actually on the eve of all the commencement activities that are about to kick off tomorrow. So I hope you guys are enjoying some of the festivities. You might have a graduate who has butterflies in their stomach and is getting ready to cross that stage. But at any rate, no matter where you are in your journey, I think you're going to get a lot out of this really fascinating webinar tonight. Really excited to introduce Michael Sherman. He is our expert presenter tonight. Michael is an 86 college alum of Emory. He has got all sorts of great Emory memories and stories and is a great exemplar of Emory University in a lot of different ways. He founded Graduate to Employment to coach and mentor countless young people to be in the best position to find substantive internships and full-time employment. I don't know about you, but I was really blown away by the 1.8 million graduates who are looking to enter the workforce every year. Just with that number alone, you can obviously see how competitive it is for graduates this time of year and this time of their life to transition from college to a full-time fulfilling job. So Michael has got a wealth of knowledge and experience to help your student prepare and not only prepare, but actually be a really strong candidate to get a solid job that gets them on the track to a fulfilling career. Michael has been a recognized thought leader in the field of staffing and recruitment for over 25 years. He led global recruitment for the Bank of America, overseeing the hiring of thousands of students annually, and has been called the ultimate insider on what companies seek when making entry-level hires. Senior executives have solicited Michael's expertise to advise their own children, including sitting board members of Fortune 500 companies. As a frequently invited guest of the Obama White House, Michael advised the President's Department of Labor on what companies and hiring decision makers look for in prospective candidates. Please visit his website at graduatetoemployment.com. This is also going to be featured in the slide deck. And if for any reason you need to step away from your computer, don't feel like you're going to miss out because we'll be sending the recording and the slide deck right after this webinar. And without further ado, I welcome Michael and hand it over to him. And we do want to encourage everyone who's listening to please use the question box on the right-hand panel to submit any questions. And Michael's willing and interested in answering questions as you think of them throughout the evening. So with that, thank you for being here, Michael, and I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lane. I appreciate it. And thanks to everybody who's joining us this evening. I'm really looking forward to walking everybody through what it's like for our children. I say our children because my daughter is graduating this weekend. What our children are going through that differs from when we were transitioning from college to professional life. So I do these presentations all over the country, and I always begin by saying my goal is that if the folks that are experiencing this presentation walk away with a greater understanding of what it's like for this generation to transition, then I view it as successful. So as Lane said, please feel free at any point in time to ask any questions or comments that you may have, as I find that just adds more to the content of what we're going to discuss. So aside from, and I think everybody can relate to this, aside from our home, educating our children will likely be the largest expense that we incur as parents. Top 50 university, according to Bloomberg's average cost is $63,000 with a 4% increase year over year. When you factor in things like private school, SAT tutors, test preps, college coaches, it will likely be the largest expense, coming in at somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 on an annualized basis to educate our children. The transition has never been more stressful for our kids. As Lane mentioned, there's an average of 1.8 million new graduates looking for a limited amount of entry-level opportunity every year. Goldman Sachs, for example, last year for their analyst summer programs, they had almost a 250,000 applications were submitted just for their summer programs. The United States government estimates that 260,000 recent graduates are working at or below the federal minimum wage. And remember that previous slide where we just talked about that it costs us between $300,000 and $400,000 to educate our children. And the average grad who graduates without a job, the average time it takes for an unemployed grad to find a position is 7.5 months. So what you're looking at are many students are disillusioned before they even begin their job search with these daunting type of statistics. There's a lot of support this is kind of a busy slide, but I like it. It's a lot of support for the transition from high school to college. There's been a lot in the news lately, obviously, about college coaches and what have you. So there's a lot of support for the transition from high school to college, but there's not a lot of support for that transition 4 years later from college into what we call the real world, the professional world. So this is literally a screenshot, a Google screenshot, typing in college admissions coaches, and in 0.51 seconds or 0.59 seconds, I got over 1.5 million hits. So lots of support on the way in, but not lots of support on the way out. I have 2 children. I have a daughter who's graduating this weekend, and I have a son who's graduating from high school this weekend. And when he and I and my wife would go on college visits and, walking around the campus, and people would point out, this is the library and these are the dorms, I was always asking where career services was, how many of your graduates graduate with jobs. Those were always questions that I was asking because 91% of students said the number one reason that they were going to college was to improve their chances for employment. And so what students are finding out today is students are telling us they need more help. From a numerical perspective, for every one career services professional, there's almost 2,700 students on a national basis looking for support from that single career services professional. 51% of graduates admitted they didn't know how to write an effective resume. And 60% of employers felt that applicants had to be more familiar and better prepared for interviews. So again, extremely competitive. Students are stressed about it, and students are saying they need more help. What's that resulting? Record number of students are moving back home. The highest rate, 37% of new graduates is the highest rate of moving back home since the Great Depression. You've got more students living with parents than spouses at 27%. And 40% of millennials are still receiving money from their parents in terms of support. And so the question for the parents is, as parents have put together a retirement plan, do those retirement plans take into account post-college financial support for sons or daughters? Most of the time, the answer is no. There's more debt right now in terms of students than there has been at any point in time. I think that's not new to anybody. $1.5 trillion in outstanding loans. 7 out of every 10 students will graduate with some type of student loan. There's more debt for education right now combined than there is in the United States for credit cards. The average amount of debt is $35,000, and almost a fifth of those owe more than $100,000. And the reality is repaying debt cuts into one's 401k retirement balance. And so debt can really put you, behind the 8 ball, if you will. And what it does is the competition is extremely fierce for those limited amount of opportunities, because even if one's son or daughter graduates debt-free, remember that 7 out of every 10 of their classmates is extremely motivated to find work because the clock is ticking on his or her student loan. Having said all of that, how competitive it is and how people are moving back home and how much debt there is and how there's limited opportunities, this is the best outlook for graduates since 2007. Almost 46% of employers described the job market for new grads very good to excellent. and that's up from 37% last year. 75% of employers tend to hire, said they're going to hire more recent college graduates, up from 67% last year. And organizations are adding 1 to 5 positions for new grads this year. So while extremely competitive, it's the best job market that has been in 10 years, well, over 10 years for these new grads. Average salaries for 2018 right here by major for our sons and daughters. It's up 3%. So it's just shy of $50,000, which is up by 3% from the average salaries of last year's graduates. Top paying locations, obviously just a few cities right here. Cost of living increases, probably no big surprises here, with San Francisco and New York being amongst the most expensive or the best salaries in terms of location based upon cost of living. And when adjusted for inflation, the class of 2018 made 14% more than those who graduated in 2007. So again, while extremely competitive, it is a great time to be looking for an opportunity. Top paying employers for entry-level hires last year, or 2000, we don't have the 18 data yet, but for 2017, right here, you'll see them. A lot of big global companies, which represents more opportunity for our sons and daughters as they look to transition from academic to professional life. What are employers looking for? GPAs and majors are becoming less and less important. 67.5% of employers are screening through GPAs. That's down from 71% in 2017 and 79% from just 6 years ago. 93% of employers think that soft skills are more important than a candidate's undergraduate major. And only 27% of college graduates are working in a job that relates to their major. And so campus hires in terms of an employer, as Lane said, I ran global hiring for Bank of America for 10 years. And prior to that, I ran global hiring for EMC Corporation. And we always looked at campus hires are helping to create diversity. And both diversity, obviously, in terms of gender and ethnicity, but also diversity of thought. And so when a young person comes in, we weren't necessarily looking at their educational background as much as we were looking at their softer skills and what they could bring to our company. I like this slide a lot. This shows don't sell yourself short, you should go for it. These are some sitting and former CEOs of obviously major companies that were not business majors per se. So for example, my old boss at Bank of America, Brian Moynihan, he was a history major. Carly Fiorina, who ran HP, medieval history and philosophy. Howard Schultz, former Starbucks CEO, communications. Bill Gates has said, if I had to do college over again, I'd major in artificial intelligence, energy, or the biosciences. So just 11% of S&P 500 CEOs have majored in business. So I have lots of clients. I had a client last year who was an engineering major at Notre Dame. And he, when his mom called me and I had a conversation with him, he wanted to go into consulting. And he began working with me about this time last year because the consulting organizations do their recruiting on campus in the fall. And his question to me was, why are companies going to look at me? I want to work for one of the larger consulting firms. And my friends who are looking at these same opportunities are all business majors. They're econ majors, they're finance majors, and I'm an engineer. And I said, that's exactly why the company's going to look at you, because you're an engineer. You approach problems on a data-driven thought basis, and you just happen to like to solve business problems. So he was able to articulate that during his interviews, and he'll be working, he's graduating this weekend, and he'll be working at Booz Allen in Washington, D.C. So as I say, so if majors and GPAs are less important, well, what are employers looking for in new hires? And here's the list. These are the attributes. When our sons and daughters are looking for opportunity out of college, the interviews are not based on their 10 years worth of experience, because they don't have 10 years worth of experience. The interviews and the conversations they're having and the networking they're having are all based on attributes. It's about them as people, as individual. And these are the attributes that companies are looking for: leadership, ability to work in a team, written communication skills, problem solving skills, verbal skills, strong work ethic, initiative, quantitative skills. These are the skills that our sons and daughters have to be able to articulate within their resume, within interview settings, and be able to give specific examples. So if you say, yep, I have strong leadership skills, what's an example of that? Or problem solving skills. Be able to give specific examples if you cite that these are your strengths. What most employers see in new grads, and this is a don't blame the messenger, this is just what employers see of the millennial generation. They don't want to work, they want a purpose. They're job hoppers. That the average millennial will have 6.5 jobs by the time he or she is 30. They don't want bosses, they want coaches. 60% of current millennials say they are open to a different job opportunity right now. So the jobs of our sons and daughters, when they're out there interviewing again against the other 1.8 million new graduates, student job is to articulate to that particular hiring manager that he or she is different. And how so? How do you overcome these preconceived notions of the millennial generation? This is not a strategy, but I sent my resume in. These are real statistics: 200 applicants for the average job posting. When a job is posted on the internet, within 200 seconds, a first applicant is usually received. 90% of those that apply online are eliminated through an automated algorithm process. So 2 to 6 candidates are only sent through to HR. When I worked at Bank of America, we would have 2.6 million resumes sent in each year for the jobs that we were looking to fill. I did not have the staff to look at 2.6 million resumes. And so if this is your strategy to go online and apply for jobs, you have a 3% chance of just being seen, let alone hired. Well, then how do you differentiate yourself? Student's mission: find the right people within a company to help evangelize your candidacy. They're out there through networks. Find people that you know, or that you know somebody who knows somebody at that company, that once you do apply to abccompany.com/careers, can pick up the phone within the company and say, hey, John Jones has applied for a position last night. I would appreciate it if someone could follow up with John and make sure that he is given consideration. Not hired, because nobody can say, hey, I want John hired. But considered means that John's resume, again, one of those 2.6 million at Bank of America, somebody will go in and somebody based upon that internal advocate for John will make sure that he's given consideration. So what the job is to find an insider to support your candidacy at a targeted company. Networking.
Michael, we had an interesting question just come in. For
Sure.
folks who don't have a connection to a company, or maybe they're trying to break into a really niche industry, do you have any tips on how to navigate that artificial intelligence filter?
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that they do have people that they know within that company. It's just how are they going about finding them? So, for example, Emory, obviously, very, very strong alumni association. Before we started today, you and I were just chatting about an event last night in New York with Emory alumni. There are Emory alumni in 50 states across multiple industries. Reach out on LinkedIn, introduce yourself. People are willing to help. Networking. I really preached criticality of networking. Most of the generation of our sons and daughters don't understand what networking is. Why would I want to meet with your friend? Well, why would I want to meet with your friend who happens to work in financial services in New York City? That's not what I want to do. Well, because my friend who works in financial services in New York City, his or her particular vertical is marketing. and they know every chief marketing officer up and down the East Coast. So if your ultimate goal is to get into marketing, you're going to do so by meeting with my friend who can make professional introductions for you. So 85% of jobs are filled through networking. Don't ask for a job. That's not what networking is. That's an interview. Ask for advice. Every networking conversation will start the same way. How can I help you? And as a student, you have to have an answer for that question. The right answer is, hey, again, I'm based in Boston. And a lot of my friends that I'm still very, very close with to this day, that I graduated from Emory back in the mid 80s, they live all over the country. And a lot of them have sons and daughters that go to school here in Boston. And I constantly get requests from their moms and dads, would you meet with my son or my daughter? My answer is, of course. And so when I sit down with he or she, I get one of two answers when I say, how can I help you? The first answer is, my mom or dad says you know everybody in Boston. Well, A, I don't know everybody in Boston, and what am I supposed to do with that? The right answer is, and how to be prepared is, I'm currently a senior at Boston University and I'm majoring in communications. I think I would like to stay in the Boston area and work for a larger company within their marketing or internal communication group. So the answer, Mr. Sherman, how can you help me, really would be twofold. Number one, what advice would you have for me? Are there organizations I should be looking at, particular companies I should be targeting? And probably more critical, based on our conversation, would you, Mr. Sherman, be willing to provide me with any professional introductions that you think make sense? And that's a strong networking conversation. My answer to that is always yes. So then make it easy. Say in the past, what's worked very well is when someone's offered to make an introduction, I can send you a follow-up email kind of summarizing what we've discussed with my resume attached, and all you would have to do is hit forward and send it to that connection and copy me, and I'll follow up. That's great. So again, getting this generation of our sons and daughters that aren't used to having conversations, looking people in the eye without looking at their phones, getting used to having that type of conversation, which is very foreign to them. So when I debrief a client and I say, how did it go with your dad's college roommate? And the answer from the client is, he was a really nice person. I tell the client, that's a failed networking meeting, because I can introduce you to a lot of really nice people, but they're not going to get you any closer to a job. So did he or she offer to help you? And it's critically important that this generation get more comfortable with networking. Make it easy to be found. 80% of employers will use social media to find candidates, which is up, and 57% of companies said they're less likely to interview a candidate if they can't find any type of profile online. Really, that starts with LinkedIn, but you have to be careful, because as I explained to my clients, your interview begins before you walk in the door. 70% of companies will use social media or look up social media to screen candidates, again, before they come in. If Facebook, this is fascinating, if Facebook was a country, by population, it would be the largest country in the world, third largest country in the world, only behind India and China. Yet, the average pair of Facebook's users has just 3.5 degrees of separation between them. So everybody who's listening to this presentation, we're connected by less than 4 people. So it's pretty easy for managers to find out information based on Facebook and postings. And what I tell my clients is, I have seen interviews that have gone over the course of my career phenomenally well. Managers will call me and say, I just had the best interview. I think you can cancel the rest of my slate because I'm going to hire this young lady. And then they say to a younger person in the office, why don't you see what you can find out about her? And the young person goes digging, and that's when the red cup pictures and those things appear. And managers, those scare managers. So yes, the interview went phenomenally well, and the candidate never knows why it didn't move forward into a potential offer of joining that company. Only 22% of individuals said, hey, searches about themselves were accurate. And I explain to clients, I say, okay, the search is your brand, and you are in charge of your brand. So if only 22% of what's out there is actually accurate, it's your job to clean up your brand. So if there are pictures out there or incorrect statements that are attributed to you, you own cleaning that up, because those will be found by potential employers. Cover letters. Over 50% of companies said, yeah, we like cover letters. And there are do's and don'ts of cover letters. Explain how you heard about the role, why you like about that company, what about you, but you don't want to just reinvent your resume. So it's more about your passion for that particular industry and that particular company within that industry. That's what a cover letter should be, not just a repeat of your resume. Video is the new normal. So 80% of employers have recommended that students submit some type of electronic profile that demonstrates their acknowledgement and knowledge in the area. This is kind of counterintuitive, but the most costly hires that companies will make, not from a salary point of view, but from a process point of view, are off campus. For instance, if you take a company like Coca-Cola, located in Atlanta, and Coca-Cola decides that they want to recruit off University of Oregon's campus, it's extremely expensive to fly people 3,000 miles across the country with all of the marketing material that's required to be on campus. So more and more companies are moving towards video interviews. More and more companies are moving towards video interviews. And so the job of the individual is to get comfortable with working within that video interview. Be creative, stand out. This is fascinating. This is an actual screenshot from a current client's application. So excuse my language as I read this, but this is an actual screenshot. It says, let's make this quick. Cover letters suck. So please record a short video to tell us what you're great at and what you care about. Now, when I first saw this, I thought this was kind of sign of a .com company, and sort of a startup, and this was their way of being young and hip. That's not true. This is a global employer with offices across 4 continents. So video is becoming the new normal, and our sons and daughters have to get comfortable with video. Internships. There was, speaking with Lane, she was telling me that there were a lot of questions about the criticality of internships, and I can't stress it enough. What I tell my clients is an internship is really a 10-week working interview on both sides. That you are interviewing with the company, and the company is interviewing with you. Meaning you, the student, are determining, hey, am I comfortable here? Am I comfortable with this culture? Are these the type of people with whom I'd like to work? The same thing the company is doing. The company is seeing who's coming in early, who's staying late, who's acting the most professional. From a practical point of view, 63% of graduates who completed a paid internship would receive a job offer. And salaries, if you had a paid internship, from a statistical point of view, starting salaries were 28% higher than their peers without internship experience. Now, there's stress involved in that because a lot of the recruiting for internships is done during the time when some of our sons and daughters are abroad. So how am I going to be interviewing for an internship when I'm spending spring or fall semester in Europe? You have to strategize about that. And recruiting for internships really begins during junior year. Here is 2017. These are top employers, again, company-wise, for interns. And 41% of companies indicated that they had increased their internship hiring for 2017. Companies are realizing that internships, quality internships, not getting coffee type internships, but quality internships help differentiate them amongst their students as the students return to school in the fall and talk about the experience that they had over the summer at any particular company. Interview preparation.
Michael, we have an interesting question that's just come in from a parent.
Sure, absolutely.
Their child is very interested in traveling abroad and very interested in getting a job. Would you advise that the person's child try to negotiate the start of a job offer to allow time to travel abroad?
In terms of post-graduation?
Right.
So in other words, graduating this weekend from Emory and would like to travel a little bit before starting. Is that,
Yep.
I think that's what I'm hearing.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's something that I would not mention, as part of the, my beginning process of the interview. But I think once the company narrows in on that particular student and says, "This is who we want," yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with saying, "Yup, I'd love to join the team. I've had this trip plan. I'm working with a client right now, and she's going on a safari with her mom." And so her question was, when do I bring that up? And I said, you bring that up towards the end of the process when they have said to you, you're the person that we'd like to bring on board. And you reciprocate by saying, yep, this is exactly what I want to do. And you're exactly the company that I want to do it within. Everything is working for me. I have a trip planned, and I assume that will not be an issue. Usually it's not an issue. The only time that you'll find that companies will push back on that is if the young person is starting within a training program and the training program has a hard start, let's just say of June 15th. And if you want to start in September, that could be an issue. But I think my advice to that parent who's listening to me is, have the company become enamored with your son or daughter and then bring that up as part of the closing as they're trying to woo your son or daughter, because it's competitive out there for the best students, and companies realize that. And companies
Great.
realize, yeah, companies realize that, look, the differentiator in the world these days is talent, and they're not going to lose talent over a month or so of traveling. So I hope that answers the
Thank
question.
you. Yeah, perfect.
Interviews, you can't be overly prepared for an interview. And what I tell my clients is you've got 3 jobs during an interview. Yes, if you think back to that first slide, it's competitive. So why you? Why you and not the person that the manager's seeing at 2:00 or the 4 interviews that he or she has tomorrow all day? Why you? Again, going back to those attributes. Secondly, and equally as important, is why that particular company? So I've already kind of explained why me, and hopefully I've done a good job of, differentiating myself, obviously. This is why I'd like to join your particular company, because I want to join the #1 company in this particular industry, and you folks are #1. And be able to cite specific references, business references, as to when you say, this is #1. So whether it's stock performance, whether it's overall sales, whether it's recent expansion, why do you think that they're a leader within the industry? Equally as important is the culture that you're joining. So not only do I, the candidate, want to join a #1 company in a particular industry, but I also want to join a company that gives back to the communities in which they do business. So it's not just your business results, it's that I'll give you a real life example. One of my clients was interviewing, had a final interview with HomeAway down in Texas. And as we were prepping for that interview and we looked at the philanthropic aspect of HomeAway, we came to realize that last fall, while California was going through all the fire problems that they were having, HomeAway was donating shelters to displaced families, as well as firefighters that had come in from other states to help out the firefighters in California. And so it wasn't just the business results of HomeAway. It was also the philanthropic nature of HomeAway and the way that they give back to the communities in which they do business. So really prepping for not only the interviews, but the person that you're interviewing with. So you can find out a lot of information these days on LinkedIn about somebody. So I noticed that you've been here for 10 years. How's the company changed in the 10 years that you've been here? Are you still competing against the same firms that you were 10 years ago? How do you consistently stay ahead of the competition? As a leader within this particular field, what do you see as your biggest business challenge over the next 18 months to 2 years? Conversely, I saw that you recently joined the company after spending 10 years at a competitor. What enticed you to interrupt what was obviously a successful run at the competition to join this particular company? So really getting to know not only the company, but the individual with whom you're having the conversation. Top companies see the values of coaching. This is a very polarizing slide. I realize that, but as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm based in Boston, or whether you like him or not, you can't argue the fact that Bill Belichick is very good at what he does. And it's interesting, at Fortune 500 companies, 25 to 40% of executives work with executive coaches. And as people become more senior amongst companies, obviously their benefit packages increase. And the more senior you get, coaching becomes part of that benefit package. And it's about direction, it's about clarity, better decision making, focus, accountability, and increased confidence. So coaching is a major part of what companies see as a benefit for their executives. So in summary, it's never been more competitive for our children. 1.8 million graduates are competing for limited spots. Students are saying they just don't have enough support, and record numbers of grads are moving back home. Having said all that, it's the best market in years, and companies want to hire our children. The odds are against our children getting interviews. Social media can either kill your chances or open doors once closed. There's no such thing as starting too early. Internships are absolutely critical in one's strategy, and coaching matters. So finding the right position is a full-time job. The job of our sons and daughters is to find decision makers at companies, as I say, people who evangelize your candidacy and tell them your story. So my particular journey, as I mentioned, I graduated in class of 1986. I was a history major. I have two children. I have a daughter who is graduating college this weekend from University of Wisconsin in Madison, and I have a son who's graduating high school this year, and he's going off to college. So I've experienced both transitions this year. It's been a very interesting year in my house. I've been working in this particular industry for over 20 years and probably responsible for over 1 million hires across my career. I decided to start my practice because I lost count many, many years ago, whether it was in a social setting over dinner with friends, or a senior person, a senior level board member at companies that I've worked would have the same request of me. And that was to help their sons or daughters navigate that transition from a student to professional life. That, as I said, there's a lot of support for our children with that transition from high school to college, but there's just not that level of support at the back end. And so my company, what we do is we work on limited coaching sessions with our clients, and we teach them a lot of what we've just reviewed over the last 30 minutes or so. And we work very, very closely with our clients. It's not a read module 4 and we'll discuss that, next meeting. Every client is different. So it can be on telepresence with a client and say to he or she, hey, you've got to tone it down because you're reinforcing every stereotype that my generation has of your generation. You're finishing sentences, you're not listening very well, you're speaking over me. And then an hour later, I can have a meeting with a client and say, hey, the content of what you're saying is perfect, but you're low energy. And if conducting a phone screen with you, I would have mentally checked out. Because one of the reasons that companies want to hire you, again, it's not about your 10 years worth of experience. It's about the attributes that we've discussed and the energy and vitality that you bring to the workplace. So it can vary depending on individuals. So I'll close with, if this is a student's hiring strategy, I like to say it's probably get ready for more quality family time. And with that, I'd be happy to open it up to any questions that anybody has.
That's great, Michael. Thank you so much. We've got some great questions rolling in right now. A parent asked, how do students get the company re-engaged in hiring them if the employer didn't make an offer at the end of the internship?
So great question. What I encourage my clients to do if they've experienced an internship, and some internships are made for sort of that 12, 10-week working interview, as I said, and some of them are not. Some of them are made strictly for, when I say internship interview, meaning offer at the end of the internship. And then some of them are, thank you very much. We had a great experience with you, and you'll certainly be considered. as we open up our hiring. Stay in touch with the company. Stay in touch with, ask at the end of the internship, is it appropriate if I link in with you? When that company announces their quarterly earnings and they've had a successful launch or successful earnings, send a note to that manager, letting he or she know, congratulations on a stellar quarter. Anytime something's in the news about that company, obviously on a positive basis, check in with that manager. So stay relevant. Stay relevant to that manager and let that manager know throughout your senior year that you're still very much interested in joining.
That's great. Thank you. We had another question that's coming in with that pertains to the video interview. Are there any tips on what you would suggest the graduates share in an interview that's quite open-ended and they're just looking for likes and interests and preferred work environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it gets back to when I said about, the diversity of the hire. And so what I would encourage students is to get out of their comfort zone. And what I mean by that is what makes you unique? What makes you different? How are you different and unique from the other people that are recording the same video interviews? And think out of the box. Think out of your comfort zone. So I had one client and I asked her that question and she said, well, I'm not really unique. And she was stumped. She couldn't think of anything. And the next meeting that we had, she said to me, she sent me a note saying, hey, I'm not going to be able to make this meeting because I have my kickboxing class. And I said, wow, you're a kickboxer. How did that happen? And she explained to me a story of she was in a cab in New York and the cab was stuck and it had no air conditioning and it must have been 95 degrees. And she's a big believer in karma. And she just said to the cabbie, please pull over. I'll walk the rest of the way. And when the cabbie pulled over, she happened to be standing in front of a gym that said, we teach kickboxing. And that's how she got into kickboxing. Great story. Make yourself unique. Different. How are you different? How are you different? Yep. That was her story. She's a kickboxer.
Excellent. Excellent. We've had another question that's come in. What is the one area you see recent graduates coming up short where they could actually gain experience to help their odds of getting a job?
Boy, great question. And I received that same question when I was on campus. I was on campus in March, and I was speaking to some seniors. And one of them asked that same question, what's the biggest mistake that we keep making that keeps us from getting a job offer? And I said, the answer to that is very easy. I am the kind of individual, when I interview somebody, I do not, when I'm done with the interview, I do not pick up the phone and call my receptionist and say, could you please show Lane out, or Lane's all set, please walk Lane down to the next interview. I would either walk you to the elevator bank and shake your hand and thank you for coming in, or I would walk you down to your next interview and say, thank you for coming in. It was a pleasure to meet you. And what young people fail to do, I lost count years ago, how many times I would walk back to my office and think, wow, she was great. She asks great questions. She's bright. She was prepared. I can see her working here culturally. She was fantastic. I don't know whether or not she wants to work here, or whether or not we were just another company on her list, and tomorrow she's going to company B, and Friday she's going to company C, and then she's got an interview all next week, because she never looked me in the eye, shook my hand, and said to me, I know this is competitive. This is exactly what I want to do, and this is exactly the company I'd like to do it for. Do you have anything else that I could address for you today that'll help you get as excited about my joining the company? I'd like to get you as excited about my joining as I am. That's somebody that when I walk back think, yup, she wants to work here. So the number one thing that clients need to do is to look managers in the eye, and if it's true, say, I'd love to work here.
Great, thank you. I think we have one last question to wrap us up. One parent asked, is there a certain industry or type of industries in particular that are avoiding hiring recent grads in that they prefer mid-career professionals?
No, not really. I mean, if you go to my website, I think there's a tab and it says, I know it says who we work with, and you'll see that I've worked with traditional quote unquote majors, economics and business and finance, all the way to French and the classics and everything in between. Companies realize that the differentiator is talent. And so I have not seen any particular industry shying away from entry level hires. A lot of companies converse, on the contrary, are getting engaged with schools earlier and earlier in the process. There was an article in the, I don't know what it's called, but it's the Dartmouth paper. And it was sent to me this week. And it talked about how companies want to come on campus earlier and earlier to meet with students at Dartmouth. And Career Services was pushing back a little bit because the students were pushing back a little bit, saying that they weren't ready, freshman year or first semester sophomore year to start making those type of commitments about full-time jobs. But in terms of particular companies or industries, no, I haven't seen that.
Oh, that's great. I was just kidding about that being the last question. We have one final last question that just came in. Since companies are embracing diversity in the work culture, what advice do you have for students with a disability or functional limitation?
That's companies are more than willing to accommodate and make accommodations for anyone with any type of disability. And so I know when I was leading hiring for Bank of America, we would interview based on the quality of the applicant in terms of his or her ability to come in and be a functioning, contributing member to our team. And if he or she needed any type of accommodations, that was not an issue.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael. This has been such a wonderful webinar. If anyone else has questions that you'd like to submit, I will forward them to Michael. Maybe you'll think about them later tonight or in the morning. And I know we have people joining from all across the country. So some people are just getting off work and some people are probably getting ready for the dinner table. So thank you so much for those who have been able to tune in, and we really appreciate your attendance. And Michael, thank you so much for this wonderful webinar. Such a great time for students, and you have great resources that I'm sure they would benefit from. We are going to.
I just want to say thank
Go
you.
ahead.
It's my pleasure. And to those parents that have sons or daughters graduating, congratulations. It's a great time.
Yes, such an exciting time. Thank you so much. We're going to be sending this recording and Michael's slide deck first thing in the morning. And again, if you have any questions, please share them with me and I will pass them on to Michael. And have a great rest of your evening. And please do stay tuned to the Emory Alumni Association's website, engage.emory.edu, and check out our calendar for other webinars and in-person events that are happening in your community. And with that, have a great evening, and we look forward to connecting with you soon. Bye-bye.
Lane?